today. As is my custom, I want to begin, and I'd like to invite you to join me in commemoration of those who've come before us as I read the following land acknowledgement. Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. The university resides on lands ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We also pause in this moment to honor those whose lives and labor were exploited and lost in the practice of enslavement and in struggles for freedom on the land on which I sit. I acknowledge that their presence made it possible for ours. So we take this time, this pause, as we gather to acknowledge all that has made it possible for me, for those of us at Michigan State University to live, to learn, to work in, and to be with you from this place. So I want to say to you, first of all, this conference is important. It is important work to carve out and hold space, to name and address issues that affect the mental health of the Muslim community. Healing communities begins when we allow members to show up fully and unapologetically, when we honor and care for each other enough to say that your hurt is our hurt, your needs are our needs, and when we work proactively to create conditions for well-being. So this is my goal at the College of Osteopathic Medicine, and today I'm so humbled and honored to introduce our speaker for the hour. Ameena Matthews has courageously been working for peace in her Chicago community for decades. She experienced firsthand the frequency and normality of violence in her neighborhoods and has thus been organizing to engage the public in safety and social justice action ever since. Matthews is also the CEO of Pause for Peace, an organization founded on her mediation, activism, and behavioral practice expertise. Pause for Peace's mission is to change the culture of urban youth in order to encourage their social, control, and nonviolent conflict resolution skills. Besides working directly with youth to address these behavioral strategies, Pause for Peace works diligently to strengthen the community into one that has resources for nonviolent behavior. Ms. Matthews has received many prestigious awards, including the 2013 Franklin D. Roosevelt for Freedoms Medal. She attributes her Muslim faith and family with the inspiration and strength to continue fighting for peace, justice, and community. But if you would allow me, I'd like to speak more personally. My first introduction to Ms. Matthews was through her work as a violence interrupter. While working on my research about Black women's leadership and organizing within our communities, I was led to Cure Violence and the documentary, The Interrupters. And so for me, Ms. Matthews is a real life shero. She is compassionate, dedicated, and fearless in making her community better, even when it means laying her life on the line. The Interrupters earned high critical praise and an International Emmy Award and screenings at the Sundance Film Festival. But speaking of awards, it was not long after that I watched Ms. Matthews receive the honor of the Black Girls Rock Award. And it's significant because for Black girls, women in films like myself, it was a moment that celebrated her and the legacy of Black women who have worked tirelessly for the service of our community through faith and a spirit to serve. I am so honored and just thankful beyond words for this opportunity to share space and time with such an amazing woman. And I present to you Mrs. Ameena Matthews.
Dr. Gilbert, you said her name and she disappeared.
I was gonna say, I just saw her on the screen.
You scared her.
Not at all. Let's see if we can get her back.
Maybe her link stopped working.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. There you are. Thank you so much for being with us. I wish I could hug your neck.
I wish I could be there as well, but you know, this new norm that we're dealing with, you guys, this is what it's going to be for a little while until we can figure out the science and make sure that people are safe. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me, you guys. So I am going to just really jump into the conversation. I don't want to say the keynote. I want to say the conversation, because this is greatly needed, and feeling exactly the purpose of this talk that we should have. It kind of changed a little bit. So you guys, peace and blessings to you. And here we go. Let's do this, and let's do it together. Peace be upon you. As you guys know, my name is Ameena Matthews. I am a Black Muslim woman. I am a mother. I am a wife who accepted Islam through my Abu, my father. I have been working for the people of the Chicagoland area and abroad for the past 2.5, 3-year decade. So I really want to, for one, if you guys will allow me to take this moment right now to express my greatest appreciation to Dr. Hamid Al-Talib for the invitation and the opportunity to speak on the topic of political nature, the political nature of Black psychology. I originally intended to talk about the three S's, which is understanding post-traumatic stress, slave, and shirk syndrome, and in the content of healing and the upliftment of African descents in the United States. However, I believe my topic today will be more fitting for the times we are in today, and will also connect back to the topic. I would preference this point before proceeding forward, please. In the Holy Quran, we are taught in Al-Fatiha that Allah God describes himself as the Rabbil Alameen, which translates to be the Lord of all systems of knowledge. This description basically telling us that Islam, the scripture or spiritual knowledge, and the science are not separate like our Western academia. For instance, the subject of human biology is not separate from the subject of knowledge of political science and economics. It's not. Islam reconciles and integrates all knowledge that exists in the world for the purpose of enhancing the entire life of all human beings. The next point that I would like to make is the following. Any discussion within the realm of Black psychology and understanding the psychology of Black people is, as the late Dr. Amos Williams noted, open and consciously politics. And it is that political structure that must be recognized as very biased for what we might call mental problems in the Black community. The very foundation of Black upliftment is limited by proverbial ceiling. The system of oppression upheld by the pillars of white supremacy and its quest to remain global significant. we will be addressing now the Eurocentric psychology. Paradigm is lifted in being able to address all needs of the descendants of Africans that was held in bondage. I wish to start with thoughts from a book titled The Politics of Abnormal Psychology, where Dr. Isaac Paninsky makes the case for more conscious approach to psychology. He dives into the term defect methods, which analyze inappropriate behavior as being part of an internal or organic or a psychological malfunction. In other words, the abnormal of persons and inherent to that individual and the environmental factor on behavior and I'm sorry, guys, I'm moving a little too fast. My mind is going and I want to give this information. So behavior and considered secondary. The paradigm, however, fails to look at the critical need of social action, as its emphasis is mainly focused in persons being labeled as less able organisms. Dr. Isaac also emphasized a great need of expansion in the areas of community psychology, while criticized the academia neuro-liberation of psychology. The social work as the reason why they have been unable to challenge the political system, the status quo, and met the needs of the people. Any approach to the psychology that is non-political fails to access the political roots of the in effect behavior of the individuals. For us to improve such behavior, there will not be a fundamental social change in how these matters are addressed. However, community psychologists like myself must sacrifice the professional comfort that comes from accepting the existing social structure of Western academia. The paradigm of Western psychology is to be distinct with human expression in the hopes of finding reconcilable laws of behavior, as opposed to the development of a holistic understanding, which understands and addresses the root barriers to promote human welfare. This is due to the latter being of the perturbing to the status quo. It is important to note that white psychologists operate in white domain society, contribute to white supremacies by putting forward notions that African people were mentally inferior to European people. G. Stanley Hall, who founded the American Journal of Psychology, wrote that certain primitive race are in state of inhumane development and must be treated gently and understandingly by developing people. Africans, Indians, and Chinese are members of the adolescent race in stance of incomplete development. Carl Jung also expressed a similar view when he stated that Africans have a whole historical less. Let me start over in quoting him. It's very profound. Carl Jung also expressed a similar view, and he stated when Africans have whole holistic less of a collective unconscious that the Caucasian race have. Very rarely did white psychologists feel the need to address racism or the social politic structure that oppress African Americans. Psychologists of African descent have used their work, and not only the things that psychology have typically studied, such as behavior and the subconscious and the subconscious, but have also used their work to challenge the status quo by addressing and ending the social political change. Dr. Amos Wilson referred to these as primarily different African Eurocentric psychologies. One of the best example for stresses, these difference is demonstrated by, it was demonstrated by the Black Doll study, ended up being very instrumental in Brown versus Boyd of the education case that ruled segregated schools was unconstitutional. The studies was conducted by a husband and wife team who were both psychologists. They were known as the Clarks, Kenneth and Marion Clark. The Clark experiment contributed the segregation laws being changed after their doll test demonstration how the policies of segregation had been adverse psychology impacted on children of African descent. Dr. Ameena Akbar was another noble Black psychologist in the Black movement to develop African psychology. Dr. Akbar felt that the psychology analysts, behaviorism, and humanism were inadequate for understanding the human psyche, especially the African psyche. Dr. Akbar explained that every Black psychologist in history had to be trained and awarded degrees based on having the understanding and the mastery of fundamental defined by white males of a Judeo-Christian Christian thought disciple. Dr. Saheed, Wade Noble, and D. Phillips McGee have also made great contributes toward African-centered psychology. This approach to the African-centered psychology grew out of a direction involvement in organizations that were working for the liberation of African Americans. Both Dr. Kaba and Dr. Saheed were members of the Nation of Islam. Dr. Kaba stated the following about the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam was doing miraculous work and altering the behavior of the chronological self-destructive groups of sustained abusers, criminal types, social mischiefs, and from range of conditions that had already come to understanding as being reflected of self-alienation, had characterized the social stigma and the formal American slave. He continued, I did not know what the answer was with the limited tools that I had been given with my training in the Western psychology. But I knew that Elijah Muhammad had hit upon something that was making a real difference in the African American community. It was generated impressively productive behavior from the least productive element of American society. The reasons why the Nation of Islam was so effective in creating such a positive behavior change because of the organization addressed the social and political conditions in which African Americans live in. It was not enough to simply point out how certain types of behavior was self-destructive. The Nation of Islam worked to address the very root of that problem. They worked exclusively to address the roots of the problem. They rehabilitated those addicted to drugs and cigarettes, and also promoted healthy eating. We are what we eat. They did not only take the people off the street, but they also built businesses that would employ people. The Nation of Islam put into practice some of the ideas that were mentioned by Dr. Isaac, which was namely to address behaviors through directly addressing the social economy concerns. On the international front, the work of social psychologists and Brazilian activists, Adnan Marine Santos Roland, demonstrated the most extensive example to political nature of Black psychology. Dr. Roland began her activism not against race, but as a member of the student movement in Brazil that protested the power of the military government. Roland did not become involved in the movement against racism until the 1980s. when Brazil began moving toward democracy. Rowland began addressing racism and became one of the founders of the Institution of Black Women, also known as Galés, and Falata, or the Black Voices. The organization Galés is described as a Black women's organization which institutional mission is to fight racism, sexism, where promoting a value while promoting and valuing women who are of the African descent. The objectives is to increase the visibility of the racial problem in Brazil and to make the government and civil society more sensitive to the discussion of growing exclusionary process faced to the poor, discriminated population who are also African descent. Galés was formed to quote, unquote, Black feminists. African feminists found the feminist movement within Brazil where we're not addressing issues of racism. Dr. Rowland urged that African women in Brazil were oppressed 3 times. 1 for being African, 2 for being poor, and 3 for being a woman. Dr. Rowland recognized that there was no existing organizations in Brazil that effectively dealt with intersecting issues of racism, sexism, and poverty in Brazil. Dr. Rowland also stated the following: today, it's no longer possible for large encounters to take place or for a large encounter to take place about Black, about women, that does give question to Black women and on a larger political space and a separate place of importance. Galés was involved in important development in the African struggle in Brazil. Amongst them, developed health programs to address reproductive health and AIDS prevention. Dr. Rowland also has worked within the UN to address matters of racial discrimination, xenophobia, and intolerance. She also directly raises the issues of reparations for African descent in the United States. She writes the following on the matter of reparations. African Americans must be assured just and equitable reparations for both matters, more damage that suffered as a result of radical discrimination. She writes the following. She continues on writing. Reparations should have significance or power to discourage the accuracy of the offense by implementing appropriate laws, adequate training on how to check judicial powers that seeks to limit radical justice are keys, issues that's needed to implement to assure economy, social, and cultural rights of African Americans. Dr. Rowland was trained by a psychologist, but has struggled against racism, addressed the needs of political activism. Black psychologists like myself and the fellow scholars mentioned here have sought challenges of racial status quo of society which they live in. We Black psychologists recognize the traditional approach to the study of psychology that were developed by people of the European descent is inadequate for dealing with the psychology challenges of African American people. You guys, I work for, well, I want to say I work for an organization, it's Pause for Peace, and it's out of the Masjid al-Hafiz. We have Protector of the Bread. But I want to talk about Pause for Peace for real quick before we go any further. I decided to implement Pause for Peace for the very reason that I just stated in my my keynote in our discussion. I want to say that in our discussion that, you know, the motto for Pause for Peace is don't let 30 seconds of rage change your life forever. And what I realized by being a great granddaughter of I don't know how this could possibly even, for me to even say it, it kind of blows my mind, but a free slave, and watch the injustice of traveling back from the North to the South and watch how what the great American dream was for African Americans, it was not taken care of because the trauma and the drama was not addressed by being kidnapped from an island, drug over, and given a religion, food, and a lifestyle that was not accustomed to, that was caused post-traumatic throughout our generations. So I felt like we need to build a program of restorative practicing, giving people a chance to sit in what our ancestors has taught us, that a restorative circle, peace circle, practicing, and give each and every one a chance to check in, to be heard, no matter how the energy may feel. Let's hear the words and allow that process to go through. I am willing to continue to have this. This conversation, it must not stop here. This conversation may be uncomfortable for those that it needs to be uncomfortable with, because those are the ones that are going to change, that's going to help us kick that door in and changing the laws. So Pause for Peace, don't let 30 seconds of rage change your lives. I deal with the guys and girls and their moms that have been shot, potentially to be shot, homeless, 13 to 17, 21 sometime, that is not in school, making sure that they have resources to keep this moving, as well as coming in and checking in on a session. You guys, thank you so very much. God bless you all. Thank you for this conference. It is such a mind-blowing, I snuck in on some other ones, and the wealth of information. It's just, I've taken notes, and I'm going to continue taking notes. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Did I do that under 20 minutes?
You're good. You're good. So in face of ongoing traumas and given your work with healing, community healing, what do you think more needs to be done to heal communities and augment the resiliency? We can't hear you.
Okay. That's a great question. What I feel that would work is equitable equality in the African American communities. In Chicago, Chicago is one of the most wealthiest cities in our nation, but we have the highest homeless population of African Americans, whites, Asians, indigenous people. And I feel that we must continue at a larger level, having a conversation that we must fight for our people that have dual diagnosis, just not only PTSD, that has MISA, mental illness, substance abuse, that has abandonment issues. So I think we need to continue to have conversations, and those conversations should look like with the community. Yes, those same conversations should be with the ones that have control over making policies that are not for the people. There's people that are politically in office that are voting against the humanity of the people in our disproportionate communities. And we, for the people's sake, we must make that change. So that's what I think the approach would, and continuously to talk to our young people and service their families, to make sure to let them know that, okay, politically it's not working for you guys, but on this block, on this 10 by 10, 5 by 5 blocks, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna be healthy. And if you feel if you're having a breakdown, these are the things that you need to do. Call me first, and then we have other surviving toolkits that we give them.
So, building on that, I think we also want to hear from leaders like you that how do you self-preserve? How do you do the self-care and
The what? What? Is that a such word in our lifestyle? You heard me say I am a Black woman. I am a mother. I am a wife. You think that's where does self-care fit in that, sis? I mean, the sisters on the phone know that's like almost just going to get a spa, nail, manicure, and pedicure and hurry back home and make sure that we get something to eat, and kind of chill. But for me, my self-care, honestly, is to, I know this may sound absolutely crazy. Every day for the past, I got diagnosed with leukemia 2014 and went through a stem cell transplant, and now I'm in remission, thank God. And every day I used to say, and still today I do, this is my last day. I am not going to answer any emails. I'm not answering any phone. I'm blocking everybody. I'm not getting up. I wake up for prayer, checking my emails, checking to see who called. Call back at 6 o'clock if I missed a call at 8. 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm waking people up if they called me at 8. But it's just, that's my self-care, this self-gratification to see that I got someone that has a diagnosis of schizophrenia, that it has been, inherited, but just not only the things that they're doing to themselves, but inherited from, slavery, just to see them, changing their lifestyles and saying, you know what, Ameena, I'm ready to get levelized. I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to have a new growth. It's not over. You know, that is gratification for me. But my husband makes sure that he says, hey, little mama, sit it down right here. I have to say, who you think he's talking to? You know, but he's, you know, the family has a way of balancing because there's things that's going on. I have an 87-year-old grandmother that still drives. And, you know, so I have to run behind her. So that's my self-care, just family, you know. My purpose, I feel really good. I know when it's enough. And that's one thing as a psychologist that we don't know when it's enough. When I feel anxious, when I start feeling anxious, when I'm starting to think about something that is about to happen, maybe an hour or 45 minutes ahead of time, and I'm very anxious about that, I know I need to stop, disengage, go to the park or walk around the park, and something as small as that, sis, you know, something as small as that, get a book to read, take my mind off it. So, you know, yeah, I go get my hair done, and I do. I go kind of pretty up a little bit because my daughter's 20 now. She's 20 now, and you know, so we have girl dates, and you know, and I encourage everyone on this call, in this conference, self-care must be in the conversation, sis. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you, and thank God for you, for the likes of you. And we do have a few more questions.
Yes.
Akila, can you read the questions in the chat?
Sure. Yep. So we've got one question here that says, what can youth in universities do in order to keep this collective healing process going? I'm an undergrad in Canada and really want to be a part of this conversation.
Now I'm on a space now. It's called I Grow Chicago. If you guys Google it, they provide resources in a small community, and so I don't want to scream too loud because I have security working for me, and if I scream too loud, they think somebody's up here. But what is your name, sis? Who directed the question? Was that your question or someone?
Sohail Hussein's question.
That is an awesome question. Let me tell you something. I don't know if you guys know anything about the Chicago politics and everything that the politics and all of that with J. Edgar Hoover, which was the leader of the FBI, and Nixon, and their demise after slavery. You know, the federal demise was to make sure that they continue to keep African Americans and Indians slaves if they don't have a job. That's what the Constitution says. So the question to what can you college students do? If you look back at history and Black history with Chairman Fred Hampton and my father and those political prisoners, those movements was pushed back. You all pushed back the government saying, hey, this shit we will not put up with humanity. You guys, you Black guys, you stand behind me. You white guys, you fight us. So we need you all to come out in numbers and speak truth about humanity. We're in 2021 and we're still talking about slavery. We're still being treated as if we're slaves. It's because we can write legislation. You guys get involved in the vote. We can write, if there's someone on the call that loves to write policy for politicians, and particularly federal as well as state, there's no level at all. However, we can write legislatures or House bills, but until we take down that Constitution that still spearheads and says that African Americans is not even 2/3 humans. And if you're homeless and if you don't have a job, you're subjected, you are going to be incarcerated. And while you're incarcerated, we're going to sell you to labor and you will get paid 30 cents a day, but now it's 30 cents a month. So, and what you guys, I just gave you a whole bunch of things of where you all can jump in at, you know, and jumping in on the campus for equality for African American change of the psyche here. Here, we're in times like this, you guys, we're in some serious no playing around times. So you guys must build a movement, get a coalition together and have a auxiliary group and say, these are the things that we're gonna do. We're gonna mobilize together. We're gonna mobilize as a community and we're gonna fight for human rights.
Thank you. Dr. Gilbert, would you like to add something? A question or a feedback?
Yeah, so thank you so
That
much.
setting?
Thank you so much, Sister Ameena. Listen,
Yes.
this is not as much of a question as it is an observance and just appreciation for your work. And it strikes me as we talk about mental health, some of your opening remarks addressed really working with Black women, Black girls, and femmes. So how is it that we can continue to do that work to uplift, even from the youngest age, right? To have these messages of affirmation, to build wellness within our communities proactively, right? And specifically to those, so you talked about the 3 ways in which African women kind of suffer, right? But here in America, how do we specifically give those affirming messages of wellness, of healing intergenerational trauma to our youngest girls and femmes so they grow up in a culture of wellness. They grow up in a culture of having mental health and clarity and being self-possessed. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, you know, in my own personal experience, you know, since bullying is real, even when you don't know that you're being a bully, and coming from, I met my great grandmother's father. He was Indian, and my grandmother, it's you know, my great grandmother was Black, so she was a mulatto. That was on her birth certificate back then in the slave days. But what was really so profound for me as I grew up and still going down south in the, you know, the 70s and the 80s and watching the difference between how, not just how the Europeans were treating African Americans, but how the African American sisters was treating each other. That to the point that I went to school in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was a school called Merrow's, and that's where all the dark people went. And there was a school called Hamilton. That's where all the light-skinned, pretty girls, pretty boys on the basketball, football, jock team went to. But that had to come from somewhere. And I believe that came from the division between the house and the field of how the situation of African Americans was positioned on the plantation. The house workers, her house slaves, was pretty much treated different than the field ones, and they looked different. So what we would have to do as sisters of the struggle is to let it be known of all the skin tones, all beautiful skin tones, that we are powerful, we are beautiful in our skin, and there is no superiority. We are even filled. We're just rising on each other's shoulders to crack and bust that ceiling open so we can let that next female leader through. So we just got to continue to let them know that skin color is I'm beautiful. I love my skin. I wouldn't change a thing. But we have to let it be known that sisterhood is sisterhood. It's not the light-skinned sisterhood over here, because that's what they say. You know, you can get more with, you know, from the people. It's not that. It's not the segregation. We have to knock down the segregation within our sisterhood.
Keep straightening each other's crowns. So,
Absolutely.
any other questions, Akila?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got one last question for you. So I work predominantly with the reentry population in the South Side of Chicago. And one thing I find is that oftentimes this population, they're so busy surviving that they don't ever
Mm-hmm.
get to the point of thriving. And so
Mm-hmm.
as a counselor, as a mental health professional, I would love to know some of your tips and tricks on how to really help this population get to a point where they can sustain themselves and their community, right? Does that question make sense?
So yes, you're saying that the population that is already plagued with some issue, systematic system, how can we get them to be sustainable?
Correct.
We have to first really get their heart. And I know here in Chicago, the homeless population for a while did not let me feed them because they thought that the mayor was trying to poison them, right? So it's gonna take some time. Are you still there? Okay, it's gonna take some time for, the time that it takes is that you're consistently being there for those people so they can believe, because they also, outside of PTSD, inside of that is fear of abandonment, distrust in others. Are you going to be like the others did too? Are you going to leave when I go through an episode that I don't understand? You know what I mean? So you have to be there unconditionally. And as you're there unconditionally, start making goals, short, small term goals to watch them achieve, and you blow it up for them. You give them the what's up, the BAP, the balloons, the love, you make sure that they're getting recognized for what they've done, because they're so used to getting kicked in the behind. They come in the door bent over. You know what I mean? This is not this place. It's not that place. We don't do that here. So we just, just get the people of the heart, and, not getting too deep in your life. Share a little bit about, something that may have caused you to feel uncertain with them privately. Once you let that guard down, they let that guard down, and you have them. They will do anything for you, and that means achieve. Did I answer your question, Princess?
You did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So yes, can't emphasize trust deficit, creating more predictability, and being the safe place for them. And again, thank you so much for your wisdom with us. Thank you for your courage, and you continue to take care of yourself. Take those
Alhamdulillah. You as well. Thank you, guys. God bless you. See you soon. I was trying to figure out how I can share something, but if you guys, real quick, if you have a pen and you want to take my email address, I'm very willing to share it. Is that fine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my email address is Ameena, AMEENA, and that's same, it's one word, pause, PAUSE, for, FOR, peace, PEACE, @gmail.com.
Okay.
And please join us for the rest of the conference. You don't have to sneak in, you're invited.
Thank you very much, because I was sneaking in. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for the invite.
Dr. Hamad Hamid, do you want to add something before we wrap up this session?
I have a lot of things to add, but I'm going to take it offline when Dr. Ameena joins us in other sessions.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. We now have a 45-minute break, inshallah, to pray Jummah, eat some food, and we will see you back out there in 45 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gilbert, for being here as well. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks so
you
much.
to both of you. Thanks so much. Much love.
See you, Dad. See you, Doc, soon. Email me, sis.
I will. I absolutely
Okay.
will. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Peace to you guys.
Peace.
Peace.